All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to come and view our presentation. My name is Melanie James, and I'm with my colleague here, Catherine Stevenson. I'll let her introduce herself as well.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning.
And we are from Moreno Valley College, and we're going to share a little bit today about the work that we've been doing to design communities of practice for a culturally sustaining campus.
Okay, Teaching Matters mission statement, recognizing effective teaching as central to learning. Our mission is to promote sustained professional development opportunities for instructional faculty aimed at adopting evidence-based pedagogies and practices that support improved student success and equity. So a guiding question for this presentation: if teaching matters to student learning and faculty learning communities develop teaching skills, then how can colleges scale communities of practice and institutionalize ongoing faculty learning communities?
Before we talk about scaling our communities of practice, we wanted to first back up a little bit and share a little bit about the work that we've been doing in the English discipline. So Catherine and I are both English faculty, and we have been the faculty leads for our discipline with communities of practice and professional development for a few years now. So we have used the model of MVC English as the way to kind of model and scale up the communities of practice across our college. So our professional development story really begins back around 2014. And in English, this is when we started to do a lot of work with acceleration. So we had a course called English 80, which was one of our first accelerated courses. And so we started to design a lot of professional development. We were calling them acceleration academies and pathways to success. So these workshops prepared faculty to teach accelerated courses, and they focused on promoting student success and equity. We would often integrate activities from the California Acceleration Project, for example. Around 2017, this is when our college really started to scale up MMAP, and this is when we were working a lot with the transformation grant. So we had workshops, a series of workshops that we call transformation workshops. So this was continued professional development for English, but we also partnered with math as well. And this focused on supporting MMAP students and, again, those acceleration strategies. Around 2018, this is when our professional development story began to kind of change a little bit, and when we really hit our stride. So the first thing we did is we started to hold institutes. So these were discipline-wide full-day institutes that were during the intersessions, so right after the semester ended or right before a semester ended. And these institutes focused more on culturally responsive teaching and best practices. And they were also a way for us to really get together and start to design materials for the discipline together. And this is also around the time when we first established our community of practice in English. So since we are composition and English instructors, we affectionately called it the comp because we thought it was cutesy. And since then, we have had 8 cohorts, and we have seen the comp really shift and evolve over time. So you can see here, you can see in the background, you can see images of our faculty working together. And so even one thing I wanted to highlight is even with the transition to COVID, we've continued this community of practice online, holding Zoom meetings. We actually have one tomorrow. We're holding a workshop for our English faculty. And we're planning to continue as long as we can with this community of practice. One thing that has made this model so successful is that we have found funding to pay our part-time faculty to participate. So we really credit that to we really credit that as a part of our success and a lot of our participation. So as I mentioned earlier, we have seen this evolution of content and focus over time. So when the comp and when our PD first started out, it was really focused on that rethinking of what remediation meant as the English discipline was evolving and moving away from those remedial courses and the remedial pipeline. So it started out with concepts like backward design, just-in-time remediation, high support, high challenge, focusing on integrated reading and writing. But then we started to move into things like active and collaborative learning, student-led classes, activity-based learning, and community writing. The most recent iterations of the comp has been more focused on culturally responsive and anti-racist teaching, because once we did that work to demolish the pipeline and get equity in terms of access, we had to rethink how we were structuring our classrooms. So now we're focused on these sort of topics, leveraging our students' funds of knowledge, inclusive and classroom environments, non-punitive syllabi and policy, equitable grading practices. In English, we focus a lot on teaching authors who represent our student population. We've done a lot of work with anti-racist assessments, students' right to their own language in the English classroom, inclusive and belonging, inclusion and belonging in the online classroom. So with the most recent comps, we've also started to integrate training and professional workshops around online teaching as well. And so we've also done high impact practices for synchronous and asynchronous online classes. And before we share a little bit of data with you, we also wanted to share just some takeaways that faculty have shared with us. So we have here Samantha St. Clair. She is English faculty. So she shared that she now uses mini poster presentations and jigsaw presentations. She gives out roles to each student in a group so that responsibility is shared but not overwhelming. She says, I also learned and now teach using activities like student self-reflections that helps them really understand their reactions to what they learned. So this was a reflection based off of workshops that we had done around interactive learning and metacognition. We also have a reflection here from Graham Hall, who shared the professional development sessions run by faculty at MVC are an incredible asset. They are a service to adjunct faculty getting started in their careers and a service to students taught by them. The PD sessions at MVC made me a better teacher pretty much immediately by supplying me with concrete tools for keeping students active and attentive, and activities that encourage learning in group settings with structured and unstructured dialogue. I've learned as much about being an effective teacher for underserved students in a few PD sessions as I have my entire grad teaching career up to this point. And I want to highlight here the fact that Graham brought up this idea that he is an adjunct faculty and he was a new faculty. And so having this community of practice really, I really want to emphasize the word community. It's really brought us all pretty close together. And I think it's helped build that welcoming and inclusive environment for part-time and full-time faculty alike. And then the last reflection I wanted to share was from Katie Sense, and she says that I've been given tools, including activities, ideas for reading sequences, and discussion that have allowed me to incorporate culturally relevant and equitable practices into the writing classroom. I no longer use punitive language and syllabi. Instead, focusing on strength-based language, I have also reevaluated my syllabi and started to incorporate grading contracts to promote equity and student success. So we can see that faculty have started to take some of these practices that we've been working with, and they have started to shift and change their classrooms from the inside.
Okay, this, some data, we're going to share some data now. And what we're looking at here is the vast majority of English faculty have had more than 12 hours of PD. So this is 98%, which we think demonstrates a sustained, continuous professional learning community in our discipline. And here it's kind of broken down. And I should say that this data was compiled in fall 2019. So it has not been updated in the last year and a half or so by beginning in about 2013, 2014, by 2019 we'd had 98% participation in at least 12 hours of professional development. Okay, now this one is a little bit harder to follow, but this is saying overall 42 part-time English faculty attended 1,277 hours. So you can think of that as the paid hours, and 9 full-time English faculty attended 468 hours by 2019. So we offered 127 hours, and then that 1,277 is the total attended. One thing I thought was pretty tremendous is that by fall 2019, we'd had 90% of full-time faculty had attended over 60 hours of professional development. So we found that pretty remarkable. This slide shows how a little bit of work has a huge impact, right? So if we have 46 faculty in professional development over the course of 1 year or 2 terms, I think, we see that that's roughly 198 sections, and that means that we are reaching 5,940 students. It's a huge impact when we think about just even one practice, right? In the English department, in the English discipline at MVC, I think it's most faculty are now using anti-racist assessment practices such as contract grading or labor-based grading. So our data has shown that professional development correlates with higher success and retention rates. And we actually, so you can see here the success and retention rates of the discipline average versus the professional development cohort in fall 19. And so we're giving, we actually had two groups to look at, because we had those who were not enrolled in professional development, and then we had the discipline average, and we're just both show that we have higher success and higher retention among faculty who are enrolled in professional development. So some outcomes that we are attributing to regular, ongoing, sustained professional development in English, increased success and retention. Now our throughput rates rose from 18% in 2010 to 66% in 2019. Of course, that, a major contributor there was getting rid of the remedial pipeline. But we were prepared to do that, and we were moving in that direction. And before AB 705 came out. And so we were able to support a successful transition to the AB 705 climate. Because of professional development, we are also on the same page about our open access at MVC. Now, this is not district-wide, but at MVC, we have open access to English 1A, so we're not recommending or requiring students to take co-requisite support course. And it's not currently offered right now. And I think we mostly feel that that is, that was sort of fortuitous, because then we went online, and I know other schools were struggling with what to do with their co-requisite support courses in this new online environment. We also revise our course outlines of record. So English faculty, and this is college-wide, revise our 1A and 1B course outlines of record to systemize practices that support student success, including recommending instructors bring to the center writers of color and historically marginalized writers, adopt culturally responsive and anti-racist teaching pedagogies, align word count with transfer requirements, which meant reducing our word count, and recommending the use of zero-cost textbooks and OER.
And I just want to add to that briefly and just kind of highlight and emphasize that all of this work that is replicated in the course outlines of record, it really came from these communities of practice, in the sense that we were doing this work in the communities of practice and faculty were making these changes. And so we simply institutionalized that culture of change in our composition sequence. And that we have continued holding workshops to support faculty through this new change as well. So now we want to take a few moments and share about Teaching Matters. So that's where we were with English, but what Catherine and I are doing and partnering with the Office of Institutional Effectiveness and Guided Pathways is we want to bring the success that English has seen, and we want to bring that across campus. So we're thinking about how we can scale communities of practice beyond just English. So Catherine is going to share with you the kind of the content of what Teaching Matters is.
Okay, Teaching Matters workshop series, Designing Communities of Practice for Culturally Sustaining Campus, is a series of 3 workshops right now, each 3 hours, where faculty participants will learn about establishing ongoing professional learning in their own disciplines, both logistics and ideas for content, receive toolkits on data, equity, culturally responsive teaching, and more, and design their own, 3-hour professional learning workshop.
So the first, you can kind of see our sequence of workshops here. So the plan for spring 2021 is we are getting faculty, a group of multidisciplinary faculty together. Catherine and I, again, are working with our Office of Institutional Effectiveness, and we're holding a series of workshops to kind of walk them through with a train the trainer approach of here's kind of what English has done, and here are some practices for getting started, and how to develop ongoing sustained professional development in your own discipline. So we're going to be holding 3 workshops this semester with these multidisciplinary faculty leads. And then, as Catherine mentioned, their end goal is to then hold a workshop. So we actually had the first workshop last week, and it was focused on designing with data. So as I mentioned, we're partnering with the Office of Institutional Effectiveness, and we're integrating data coaching. So the Office of Institutional Effectiveness and our Dean, Jacob Kavari, they created these data dashboards for our faculty participants, and these are beautiful data dashboards, and we're really excited about them. And so each discipline had their own dashboard, and they were able to interactively click around and look at the data for access, success, retention, disaggregate that by different equity groups and targets. And so what we did during that first workshop is we gave them time to look through that data and take a moment and think about what their data story told them. And so we shared with English like how we always design with data in mind. So all of our professional development is designed around data, and all of the decisions that we make in the discipline is data driven. All of it are data driven. And then we also gave them logistics and a template for setting up their first professional development meeting. The next workshop is going to be focused on equity framework. So we are going to talk about how to always keep that equity framework in mind when you're designing and planning professional development. And then the third workshop is going to be focusing on establishing ideas for culturally responsive and culturally sustaining content for their specific discipline. So we'll share some examples from the English discipline. So one thing that we do in English in our communities of practice, not only do we bring in research and pedagogy from our discipline, but we also bring in we also build in time for faculty to design and create content together. So we'll talk about ways that they can do that perhaps in their own disciplines as well. And then finally, at the end of this semester, they will facilitate a 3-hour professional development meeting for part-time and other full-time faculty in their discipline. So currently we have 8 disciplines represented in Teaching Matters, and we have secured funding through Student Equity and Achievement for their part-time faculty to be paid. And I saw a question in the chat about the data that is included in the dashboard. So the dashboards are going to be continuously updated and added to as we go throughout the semester. Currently for the first meeting, it had headcount data. So this allowed us to analyze access and so we could see who was entering our classrooms and who was actually in the classroom and thinking about things like access. It had success for their discipline, and they were able to disaggregate that by different racial groups and different gender groups, and then retention. But we're also going to be adding in additional information, and an exciting thing that we're doing for this second workshop is we're also going to be getting personal equity data. So each of the participants will then have data just for them. They'll receive it privately directly from the Office of Institutional Effectiveness, and then they'll be able to reflect on their personal equity data and see, exactly what's going on with their own data, and also kind of build in time to reflect and think about ways we can change our practices and become better teachers. And I also saw the question about the co-rec. I'm going to come back to that at the end of the presentation. So please remind me for that.
Okay, Teaching Matters, the why. So recognizing that ongoing professional development correlates with higher success and retention, we want to work to reduce persistent equity gaps, support implementation of disciplines program review action plans, ongoing communities of practice and discipline-specific professional development align with multiple campus and district-wide initiatives and goals. So most notably, guided pathways, and student equity and achievement, and institutional effectiveness. We are, as I think we mentioned, that this project emerges from the data coaching. We're also aligned with the RCCD Call to Action Task Force with the functional area teaching and learning.
So the objectives, again, are just to scale the communities of practice beyond math and English to all departments or disciplines. So again, as I mentioned, we're currently at 8 for spring 2021. Of course, we want to increase student success and retention and equity across the campus. English itself, we still have a lot of work to do. We've come really far, but we still have a lot of work to do. So we're going to continue doing that work in our own discipline as well. We're also going to work to support the implementation of disciplines program review action plans. So that's something that we're thinking about, as well as how can we integrate data and how can we integrate professional development in our program review action plans, and then how can we make sure that we're systematically going back and following up and making sure that we have across campus actually done what we said we're going to do, or followed through with those action plans. And then of course ensure alignment across student equity and achievement, guided pathways, and IE.
This slide is showing just our spring cohort participants. So you see we have a bunch of disciplines that we're working with. Very exciting. We also are fortunate to have district-wide participation. And I just mentioned the office and initiatives that we're working with.
So this was the agenda that we gave out. I think I already went through and explained exactly what it is that we were doing for each of those. But this is an agenda that we gave out to our faculty. So again, those 3 workshops, and then culminating in their workshop that they will lead. But I can go ahead and share about this one as well. So the next steps. So we envision this as a long-term project. So of course, we're just getting started this spring. We're still figuring things out. So, you know, we're really excited. I think there's a lot of momentum, but we're definitely still in the figuring this out stage. But this first cohort of participants, again, will be attending those 3 workshops, and then they'll facilitate their own 3-hour session for their discipline. That's envisioned as a kickoff meeting because, of course, the goal is to get them to support them through establishing communities of practice. So what we're envisioning in the next couple of semesters is, so in fall 2021, we'll come back to this cohort number 1. They're going to receive logistical support as they facilitate an additional 6 hours of PD. So perhaps, you know, 3 workshops throughout the semester. So we're starting smaller and then trying to scale up again. But then we also wanted to introduce a second cohort with even more disciplines and more faculty leads, and kind of start the same process over. And that would roll over into spring. So then that second cohort would then facilitate 6 hours of PD, and then we would start a third cohort as well. So again, this is that train the trainer approach. And so we envision long-term that we would have multiple communities of practice going on within each discipline across campus.
And so we just did 3 cohorts of teaching matters, anticipated student impact here. So if we are able to work with 105 total faculty, and we estimate that's about 900 sections, then we see an impact of 27,000 total students.
So we wanted to, before we move into the question and answer part of the presentation, we wanted to share some of the questions that we were asked to share for this particular presentation. So one of those questions was, how has Teaching Matters improved the student experience? So I think we spoke to that a few ways, but we wanted to share a couple of these examples. So we definitely see that it has improved the classroom experience. So we have instructors who are now rethinking their policies. We have instructors rethinking their teaching strategies, their learning environments, and in order to be anti-racist and culturally responsive. We have, from professional development, seen a change in our curriculum. So that's a very concrete change, improved curriculum. So rethinking course outlines of record to reflect anti-racist and culturally responsive strategies and align with transfer requirements. And we have improved that atmosphere of inclusion and belonging. So we have this really big focus of culture of care and accountability. And then also far-reaching impact, so that improvement of student success and equity. And again, we have a lot of work still to do, but we also want to take a moment and share what we have seen in terms of improvement.
So as a recap, data is central to the work that we're doing here. So we are learning from data that demonstrates success and retention are improved by communities of practice. We also learn about the impact. Designing with data. Data on student equity has informed the content of our professional development workshops. For instance, we rely heavily on, Inaway and other scholars who've done a lot of work data collecting regarding the effectiveness of contract-based grading, for example. We are partnering with the Office of Institutional Effectiveness right now. So his team, with this team, we are embedding the data coaching and including personalized data dashboards on student success, retention, and equity. And like we said, the individual equity data that teachers are going to get. We use data to request funding. And as the data demonstrate improved success and retention in English, scaling professional learning has been embraced across campus. So it's central in every step.
And another question was, how has Teaching Matters addressed or improved racial equity on campus? So racial equity is at the heart of the Teaching Matters project. So it is anti-racism and racial equity are centered. So an example would be personal equity data that participants receive, and reflect on. Another example might be the focus on scholarship and rethinking teaching strategies and policies for increased equity, like the anti-racist assessment practices. But not only is it centered, we are working to institutionalize it. Again, that example with the course outline of record, and how instructors are asked to center writers of color. And we specifically use the word anti-racist in our course outline of record, which, so we are making those institutionalized changes.
Okay, what role does student voice engagement ownership play, and why did it matter? So we have incorporated student panels and workshops. So for example, a student panel on faculty policies and ways to better support students, student panel on ways to more effectively use embedded supports like supplemental instruction. We've collaborated with students and invited student participation during community of practice workshops. Feedback and advice from students provided faculty opportunities to listen and to respond to their needs. And our future goals are to incorporate and be responsive to climate surveys and student focus groups.
All right, so we have reached the stage of the presentation that we are willing to have a discussion, and we would love to get some questions for you. I think we have two unanswered questions in the chat, so we can start with those. And feel free to add questions to the chat, or after we're done answering those, if you wanted to unmute and perhaps raise your hand, and then you can share verbally as well. So I saw one question that asked about funding. So where's the funding coming from to support this PD? So that's a very multifaceted question, and I feel like it's complicated in the sense that it is changing over time. So I joined the college in 2016, and I feel like I hit the ground running trying to find money. And so with the English discipline, we had a number of funding sources. So since we were doing that work and we were tying it to acceleration, we got funding through BSI, so the Basic Skills Initiative, and we also got funding through the Transformation Grant. So that paid for a huge chunk of the English discipline professional development. We also went to the Student Equity Committee and got some funding there as well. Most recently, the Teaching Matters is being funded through the Data Coaching Project. So the full-time faculty participants are receiving special projects to participate. And as I think I did mention that the part-time faculty who will then attend their session, we actually did a funding request through the Student Equity and Achievement. So they're actually going to be the ones that are funding the part-time faculty participant. We do not yet have funding for our grand vision and scale of this project. So we are going to constantly be looking for more places to tap into funding. But we are really fortunate at our college that we're very supported. And we have a lot of great administrators who are working really hard on our behalf to find us funding to do this great work. And then I saw, let's go back to that co-requisite question. So Catherine, do you want to tackle that one?
Sure. I mean, what happened was we thought that, because this is pretty early on, right? So it wouldn't have been, I don't even know that we would have had data yet regarding success rates for the co-requisite course. We attended a CAP session that showed us the data they had, essentially saying, yes, the co-requisite does, we do see success there with the co-requisite support course, but not for the students we are recommending or requiring to take the co-requisite course. So in other words, those students weren't benefiting for 2 hours of extra instruction. I mean, they probably, their needs might have been something like childcare. So we were very conscious of the way that 2 additional hours of support, which is how our model looked, could be a barrier. So now if we're wrong about that, if it turns out that we're wrong about that, we'll rectify it because it's not gone. It's just not offered right now.
Yeah, and we were planning, that was the next step, was going to be to start collecting that data. And then COVID hit. So I feel like our data is a little bit skewed right now anyway. So that will definitely be the next step. Colleen asked a question, are you compiling examples for best practices in terms of syllabi, assignments, readings, etc.? So yes, that is actually, and thank you for that really great question. That's been a huge part of this work as well. So we are using Canvas currently. And so we have actually we have an English discipline Canvas page that Catherine and I have been building out and contributing to. So we have folders of like sample activities. So one thing that we did in the English community of practice that we're going to share with our colleagues in Teaching Matters is, as I mentioned earlier, we give faculty time to work and build materials. So what we actually did all last year is they paired up in teams and they created units. And so that included lists of readings, sample assignments, and then an essay prompt. And so it was like this beautifully packaged unit that then other faculty could just like take and use. And so we have all of these lovely units that our other faculty created. They're all culturally responsive. They all align with the new course outline of record. And so those are all up on the Canvas as well. We have our reading list all up there. And so we have also recently created a Canvas page for the Teaching Matters as well. So we're starting to build out that as well. So it's a work in progress, but we're continuously adding. And we also just envision it as a space for, again, if we have part-time faculty who come in, they have all of these resources at their, at their fingertips. They don't have to go searching for SLOs. They don't have to go searching for sample syllabi and that sort of thing. So any other questions? And again, feel free to share verbally if you would like, or you can type it in the chat. I think we still have a couple more minutes. All right, I think that might be all. So thank you so much. We did want to include our emails. So if you want to reach out with any questions or comments, feel free to please do so. And if any of you are doing similar work at your college, we would love to hear from you because we're always open to new ideas. So thank you so much for attending, and thank you for taking the time to listen to our presentation. We wish you all a great day.